Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in our Adulting 101 series, A Place to Work and a Place to Live. My name is Stacey Albanese, Associate Director of Annual Giving and Alumni Engagement here at Montclair State. We are pleased to provide engagement opportunities such as this webinar, as well as in-person workshops. Mark your calendars for these upcoming webinars and workshops. Tomorrow, July 11th, the Center for Career Services is hosting a job search webinar entitled Keep Calm and Job Search On, taking place at noon. On Tuesday, July 17th, we'll be hosting an in-person workshop hosted by Prudential Advisors entitled Steps to Buying and Selling a Home. Our final summer adulting webinar will take place on August 7th and will focus on student loans. Our office is also hosting some family-friendly summer fun series events coming up soon. Join us this Sunday, July 15th, for a day at the races at Monmouth Park. On Sunday, July 29th, we will be hosting a family day at Liberty Science Center. And in August, you can join us for a night with the New Jersey Jackals and a day of fun at the Turtleback Zoo. For more information on these events and other benefits and services offered by our office, you can visit montclair.edu/alumni or contact us at 973-655-4141. And now I am pleased to pass it over to Jill Ploskonka, our presenter for the afternoon, to talk about Adulting 101.
Thank you, Stacey, and welcome everybody. So I'm excited to share with you the topics that we're going to be covering. So we're going to first start with mortgages, and I'm going to end with the steps to obtain them. If you already have a mortgage and you maybe don't have as much interest, please know that this is going to take up about 20 minutes of our presentation today, so maybe you could jump back with us for the real estate portion. The second part that we're going to cover today is real estate agents. And I'm going to look at comparing it to your own search, and should you also consider buying or renting. We're then going to go right into workplace benefits beyond your salary. So thinking about 401ks, your health benefits, unions, and even beyond that. And then we're going to end with tips for buying or leasing a car. So again, this will be the order. Feel free to jump in at any point and tune in for the topics you're most interested in. So my name is Jill Ploskonka, as Stacey mentioned, and I oversee our Center for Leadership Development here at Montclair State University. I'm also a consultant, and I'm an avid traveler who flies for free. The one thing I am not is a financial advisor, so please know that all the information and content I'm here to deliver today is meant to help you in terms of knowledge and education for the topics I'm going to cover. But I am definitely not a financial advisor, and I recommend seeing one if you have any detailed questions. So today's format is going to be, like I shared, a lot of information. I'm going to give you some personal advice. A lot of the topics I'm covering today, I have either learned through challenges or roadblocks, or I've had positive experiences, but I want to deliver some good personal advice. And then I'm also going to end with some resources, and you'll have access to our slides, and you'll also have access to the websites that I've identified as good places to look for additional information. The best way to take away from today's presentation is, like I said, tune in based on the topics of interest. Take notes. So if you hear a mortgage term today that maybe you haven't heard of in the past, take a note and look at it at another time. And lastly, it's always good to do your own research. The information I'm providing is truly just a foundation, and there is so much more information out there. So we're going to start with a poll question, and what I'm most interested in knowing is which topics are you most interested in for this webinar?
All right, so we've launched our poll, so if you guys can get your votes in, we would appreciate it. We'll give you a couple minutes to answer this poll. And just another housekeeping item, you can always ask questions, and we will do our best to get to them either during the webinar, after, or we can always reach out afterwards if there is a question that requires a more detailed answer or we are getting a little short on time. So it looks like 66% of you guys have voted, so we're going to give it just a few more seconds and then we'll close that out. All right, and I'm going to show you guys the results. So it looks like the majority of you are interested in learning about buying a home, followed closely by the job search, and then of course sort of the overall process.
Excellent. So that gives me great insight. And the good thing is a lot of this presentation is going to focus on mortgages and also buying and finding a home. So we're going to go forward and we are going to talk a little bit about planning before we get into mortgages. And I like this quote, failing to plan means planning to fail. And so I want you to take about 15 seconds to just think quickly about your goals. And also think about, have you started to plan for them, or are you just starting to do that today? So I like to share with everyone when I give these webinars and workshops to think ahead for the next 7 years. And I find that 7 years gives us a good time span. So maybe you're thinking about buying a home. Maybe you're looking for a new job. Maybe you're going to be buying a car, or maybe you just need to review your finances. But think ahead for the next 7 years, and you want to consider family, funds, and also where you're going to be financially. So we're going to go right into our mortgage terms. So I kind of want to just start with a basic definition. So please think of a mortgage as a loan, and it's going to help you obviously finance the purchase of your home. And there's 5 parts to this. So we have collateral, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So see it as a legal contract, and this is where you're promising to repay that loan plus interest and other costs. So sometimes people think a mortgage is just, one lump sum, and it may look like that, but there's a lot of numbers that go into what your mortgage is. We're going to go into a specific area of mortgages, and they're called ARMs, also known as adjustable rate mortgages. And so this is a mortgage that has a fixed interest rate for only a set period of time, which is typically 1, 3, or 5 years. And during that initial period, you're going to find the interest is lower, but after it, it's going to adjust based on an index. So for those of you who like to know where you're going to be financially beyond 7 years, sometimes ARMs may not be the best option because, again, this is an adjustable rate based on the index. And please know there are many different types and options for ARMs. What I want to do is just kind of give you a basic visual in a chart to help give you some better insight to what an ARM looks like. So if you take a look at the green area on the screen, this is where there's a 5-year fixed period. So you're going to know what your interest rate is. But if you look down this line over 30 years, these little dots indicate when the ARM is going up or down based on the fixed interest, or I'm sorry, based on the adjustable interest rates. And if you look down here, you can change the fixed period. So you can have, again, 3, 5, 7, and even 10-year adjustable rates. So if you look right here, 5/1, that is going to be how often your rate will adjust after the fixed period ends. So even just here, even in me explaining this, you can see that mortgages are not as simple as they may sound. And so again, this is one option for those of you who are in the market for a mortgage. But again, there's so many ways to make adjustments and have different adjustable rate mortgages. We're going to go into annual percentage rates, or APR. So this is going to be that amount paid back to the mortgage lender. And so the rate may be either fixed, like we just talked about, or adjustable, as we also talked about. It depends. And I mentioned this, but I really want to stress this. These rates will change based on the bank, the federal government, and also just general market changes. And you can see here from 2006 to 2018, where we are today, there is a significant difference in where we were. So take a look at 2016. It slowly started rising. And again, these are those interest rates that banks and lenders are going to use when they tell you this is what we can offer you. So already this year, those rates have been grown twice by the federal government. And as far as I know in recent research, there's a good chance they are going to rise again 2 more times before the end of this year. So for those of you in the market to buy a home, this gives you good insight to maybe consider starting your search earlier rather than later. The insight I was given from my broker on a property I was hoping to invest in was there's a chance those rates may go to 6% by the end of the year. So again, start sooner rather than later. And I think that's an extreme, but I think the point was they are rising. So now we're going to talk about the appraisal. So you found the house you're interested in, and now you're going to have an appraiser come in to take a look at the property. They're going to give the bank an estimated value based on the inspection, and they're going to compare it to houses around the area in recent times. Please note, appraisals are needed to ensure the home buyer, the home seller, and the mortgage lender receive the accurate and true value of the real estate in question. Some people are advocates for having their house appraised, and you're going to find some people who are selling their house are a little bit concerned. And that's definitely the home that you're going to want to make sure you have a very strong appraisal for, because you want to make sure everything is good before you purchase it. Closing costs. So these are fees that are going to vary, and typically the average cost is between $5,000 and $8,000, and you're going to pay this at the very end of the mortgage process. So they include an attorney fee, recording fees, and other costs associated with the closing. One thing to note is an attorney is not always needed, but it depends on your agent and the broker, which will save you money in the end. So for example, if you have a real estate agent who is able to serve as your attorney, you may save several $1,000s in fees. But maybe you feel more comfortable having an attorney there, then you will obviously pay those fees, but you'll feel much more secure. But definitely ask your broker and also your real estate agent what they prefer and what they recommend. So debt to income ratio came up in our first webinar, and I want to mention this again. This is what lenders are going to look for when they look at financial data to determine how much you'll be able to repay and what they're going to qualify you for. So the higher the percentage that you have in terms of debt, the more riskier the loan is for the lender. So for example, let's say you have a $1,500 a month payment for your mortgage, another $100 for an auto loan, $400 a month for the rest of your debt, then your monthly payments are $2,000. So if your gross monthly income is $6,000, your debt to income ratio is 33%. So the magic number you want to always be under is 43%. That is actually what lenders are going to look for. But the smaller the percentage, the better. So down payment, and I know this may be a very common term, but we're gonna talk more about down payments in a few slides. So this is how much you're gonna put down on the home. So generally, depending on your lender and the offer that you've been given from your lender, they're gonna ask for a specific amount down in order to qualify for a mortgage. And the percent a lot of us may often hear is 20%. And I think that that's a good baseline, but please know you can actually go as low as 3.5% down under a special program. But again, this is based on the mortgage options you select. One thing to note here is the more that you put down means the less you're going to pay in interest. So you always want to think about, would I rather have money in the bank as savings, or would I rather put more down and pay less interest over time? And that's a very personal decision. So a fixed rate mortgage, this is where the interest rate and the term of the loan is negotiated and set for the life of the loan. And so these fixed rate mortgages, they will range from 10 years up to 40. And again, this is also going to be varying based on the bank, the market, and also the federal government. So I know we're gonna keep moving along as we go through the rest of the mortgage terms, but homeowners insurance is something many people don't think about when they're estimating what that cost will be. So prior to your mortgage closing date, you're gonna want to get an estimate of what the homeowner's insurance is going to be for that house. And so this is going to ensure that if something were to happen unexpectedly, that the policy will reimburse either you or the lender for either the loss or the damage to the home. And this has to be typically in place prior to your loan going into effect to protect the bank or the lender. And also note that insurance rates will include your credit score. Not all insurance companies do, but I found that a lot of them do look at your credit score when they're giving you your insurance quote. So principal, and again, a very basic term, but this is going to be the word that describes the amount of money borrowed for the mortgage. So this is typically what you'll pay per month or as a bi-weekly payment. So here's a good example. If you need $100,000 for your mortgage, that's the principal, but it does not include the interest. And so a lot of times when we're thinking about what I can afford and how much I have down or what I want to borrow, we forget that the interest is going to drastically change that number. So think of principal as just the amount that you need for the mortgage. So PMI is another mortgage term when it comes to insurance. So let's just say you have less than 20% equity in your home. You're going to have to pay PMI, or private mortgage insurance, which is usually between 0.5% and 1.2% of your loan value. For example, 1% assessed on your $200,000 mortgage would add $200 to your monthly housing expenses until you hit at least 20% equity in your home. So that alone is a significant addition to what you were already going to have to pay towards your mortgage. So adding $200 to have an added insurance sometimes weighs people down heavily financially. So consider putting consider putting at least 20% down on your home when you can, but if you can't, there's a good chance you're going to have to pay PMI. So here's another fee, and we're going outside of specific mortgage terms, but HOA fees, a homeowners association fee, is a specific amount of money that's typically coming from an association. So it could be a condo association, a townhome, wherever you live. If they have an HOA fee, you're going to want to know what that number is. So these fees will go towards sometimes heat, hot water, maintenance. Let's say the roof is going to have to be repaired every 10 years. This is the fee that is going to cover the property that you live in, typically exterior. One thing you're going to want to know is, what is that HOA fee and what does it cover? For example, this past week I was speaking with somebody who found a beautiful condo, but the HOA fee was $820 a month. That for many people could be a mortgage. So for that reason alone, she stepped away from the property and chose not to do it because of the HOA fee alone. Now, granted, that included parking and a pool, and all the exterior maintenance was included, but it still was just not the right value for her. So another term or another administration I want to highlight is the FHA mortgage insurance. So FHA is the Federal Housing Administration, and this provides lenders with protection against losses as the result of homeowners defaulting on their mortgage loans. So typically, these loans must meet certain requirements established by the FHA to qualify for insurance. And I'm going to talk more about that on the next slide. So this is where I referenced the 3.5% down. So FHA loans will allow for you to put a lot less down, especially for people who may have lower credit scores. And they also have a maximum loan amount, which will vary by county. And there's a website that you can look up the county to see what that number will be. Something good to note, for borrowers with good credit and a medium percent down, 10 to 15%, FHA loans may actually be more expensive than conventional loans. However, if you're a borrower with lower credit scores or smaller down payment, FHA can actually be a better option for you, and it can be cheaper in the long run. This FHA loan has its own website with a lot of great resources and details, and you'll find that there's a website link in our resources. So I know I just provided a lot of terms and information on mortgages, but I want to give you a little bit of a visual, and then I'm going to show you a calculator. So if you take a look, this is a $200,000 home loan with a 30-year mortgage with 20% down, which is $40,000. So if you take a look here, the lower interest rate, and this will typically be for somebody who has higher credit, is 3.5%. They're paying about $718 a month. But if you were to have a higher interest rate, and that's probably going to be based on credit and debt to income ratio, you're going to be paying approximately $100 more for that same home. And so something that I find to be really helpful is to take a look at a mortgage calculator. see where you stand, see how much you may be able to put down in. And the one I choose is actually Zillow. And I like it because it has this advanced option as you see at the end. So let's just say you have a home, $300,000, that's the actual cost. You want to put 15% down, 30-year, and this gives you current rates, but it's just estimating 4.4%. If you want to include PMI, and remember that's because we have under 20%, you can also include it. You can include your taxes and home insurance and HOA. And right here, it gives you a really nice visual for what your payment will be and everything that's going to go into that payment. And you'll see that if we change this to 20% down, you get rid of the PMI. And you can see right there, $2,100 versus almost $2,300 a month. So you can see that putting down more money means a better payment plan without that added insurance. Something else you can always see is the current rates here. And like I said, I choose Zillow, but you can use any resource you'd like. And you're going to see that these change daily. So even yesterday when I started looking at the rates, they've already changed. And so a good thing to do is to compare them based on where you want to be. So here it says the different rates, and also it gives you your monthly payment. But as you go down, you're going to see that these change, and they can change significantly. The last thing I want to note is that some of these are advertisements. This website doesn't happen to promote them in a strong way as other websites do, but you'll see here it says advertising disclosure. Never take these for face value. Always look on another website or scroll all the way down to see what else there is. And there are plenty more. These may just not be advertisements. So we're going to go back to our presentation and we're going to continue on. And again, this calculator and more resources you're going to find in the resource section. So one more example with mortgage rates, because I really want to stress your credit score will strongly impact the interest rate you have. Someone with excellent credit may have an interest rate around 3.2, which is really low, and this is an older example, versus someone with bad credit under 620, they may have an interest of 4.8, and that's a difference of $50,000. So if you're in a place now saying, you know what, maybe I need to take a look at my credit, make some revisions, increase my score, get rid of some debt, now is the best time. I know of people who have changed their credit score in as little as 2 months. It just takes some investigation, and at the end of today's presentation, I'm going to leave you with some resources on how to do that. So kind of to wrap up mortgages, here are some simple steps to obtain a mortgage. First, know your credit score and also your debt to income ratio. These are going to be some of the first things your mortgage broker or lender are going to ask. Second, and I haven't stressed this yet, but this is going to be in my personal advice, find 1 to 3 brokers or research the rates online first. Something I've found, even if a broker is a friend or a family member, because of the bank or the institution they're affiliated with, they have very specific rates, but compare them, do your own research, and see what else is out there. 3, and I already said this, but fix any credit report issues you may have. That will also help increase your credit score. 4, determine how much you want to spend per month on a mortgage, and don't forget to include HOA, taxes, and insurance. Those are important areas that all make up your mortgage. 5, and this is in the resource section, but I want to highlight it here. You definitely want to get a pre-qualified or pre-approval letter from your broker. So pre-qualified means they're going to take a really soft look at all your finances as a whole and tell you what they believe you're pre-qualified for. If you get pre-approved, it's a harder hit on your credit, but it's going to be more specific to what they're probably going to approve you for when you get your loan commitment. And 6, you have to obtain that home inspection. That's going to protect you, the bank, and also the person selling the home. And the last step is the loan commitment. And I won't go into too much detail. There's a lot of information here, but I'd leave this in the resource for you. This is the absolute final step in the process, the loan commitment. only issued by your bank when it's actually approved to you and the house in question. So I want to end with my personal advice to wrap up mortgages. And I'm going to highlight the areas with the stars. Only borrow what you absolutely need. Again, if you have the money in the bank and you think it's going to sit there for the next 10 years, take a look at the big picture. You may be paying more interest on borrowing from a lender than using what you have in savings. It's a good way to take a look and to know what's worth it. The second is get pre-qualified before shopping around for homes. I have a friend who recently went out, found a beautiful home, hadn't been pre-qualified, and found out that she would not be able to afford the mortgage. And she fell in love with the house the minute she saw it. So get pre-qualified and know exactly what you can afford before you shop for a home. Third, increase your credit score. As you've seen in the examples I've shown, your credit score really will impact your mortgage. And so the better the score, the better the rate, the better the mortgage. And then the last two I want to highlight, get rates and options from multiple brokers, and just be really aware of sales and commission, which could influence your broker. And I have nothing against brokers or agents, but just be aware of it. I know oftentimes, sometimes sales and commission can impact them, but it's helpful for you to do your research and to know what the market rates are. And lastly, and I haven't mentioned this yet, do not make major job changes if you can avoid it. And also do not open new credit. Try not to do anything that's going to impact your credit score, and also that may help that will impact that lender's decision if they can or cannot give you that loan. So for example, if you are looking for a new job or career right now, maybe get pre-approved for your mortgage prior to making that jump if you've been in your job for 10 years. Because once you get that new job, that's what the lender is going to be looking at. How long have they been at their last and current job? So the bottom line, and I want to stress this, do your own research. Know the interest rates and the market outlook. Know what's going to happen, not just this year, but for the next 7 years. Have some insight. Make decisions based on today, but also in the future. And I think that's a tough thing to do, but try to take a big picture approach when thinking about your mortgage and your next home. So I want to pause here. I know I shared a lot of information and content, but I want to know how many of you are currently in the market to buy a home?
All right, thanks, Jill. So we've got this poll open, so go ahead and place your votes if you're in the market to buy a home. If it's something that you're researching or looking into, we'll leave it open for a little bit longer. And then we'll share the results in just a moment. Okay, looks like almost all of you have voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and share the results with you guys. All right, Jill, so what do we think here?
Let's see.
Looks like the majority of folks aren't at the moment.
Okay. So that gives me some good information. So hopefully you can use the content that I just shared in the future. But we are going to go into buying versus renting, and where I can, I will highlight that maybe the renting option, since most of you are not in the market to buy a home. So I'm going to start with real estate agents versus your own search. And for those of you who are maybe not in the market to buy a new home, maybe you're considering renting or making a change in where you live. So hopefully this will give you some good insight for that next major decision. So I want to compare agents versus your own search. And there are obviously going to be pros and cons to both. And a lot of this I've learned through my own search. So first with agents, what I love about agents, real estate agents, is they know the market and they typically know it well. So for example, let's just say you want to move to an area like Middletown or Montclair, a town that is typically well known. Find an agent in that market who knows it. They'll be able to tell you what the going rate is for an average home, or what the comps are, what's the comparable homes that are being sold. But I like to find agents within the town I'm most passionate about living in or renting. They're also there to be dedicated to you. They're going to guide your decision. And what I like about working with agents, either for buying or renting, is they can give you pros and cons, things that you and I may never have thought about because we may not be in that field. And last, about agents, they can give you insight if you are going to buy a home when making an offer. So for example, if the house has 6 offers on it over asking price already, you may say, you know what, it's not worth my time. I do not have the funds to go over that listing price. But maybe they may say there are no offers on the table at all. So give us a fair and reasonable offer, and most likely that seller will accept it. So that's a lot about why I like working with an agent. It's also good to do your own search. So one nice thing is you'll save on commission. And for some people, they don't want to lose that 6%, but oftentimes when you're buying a home, it's hard to avoid that. However, if you are renting, sometimes this is where someone will do their own search and avoid using a real estate agent because they will take 1 month's rent typically as their commission when you are looking for a new rental. The second thing about your own search, you have full control over what you see. Nowadays, there's apps and websites and easy ways to see what's on the market. 10, 15, 20 years ago, you needed that agent to show you everything. But we have these tools at our fingertips, which is always great. And the last thing is there's less support with steps to buy. So if you're doing something on your own when you're buying, you really will have less support. And for me, that can be challenging. Sorry. So one place I recommend looking, and I used this as an example before, was Zillow. But there are plenty of apps, there are plenty of places and outlets to look. And the reason I use Zillow is just because it's the most user-friendly platform that I have found. But I also like Realtor.com and even Craigslist at times, especially if you're looking for a place to rent. The last on this list, and I want to highlight this, for sale signs by owner. So sometimes you'll find a seller who doesn't want to list in Craigslist, who doesn't want to promote their place to rent or to buy, and you can drive around the area you're most interested in and look for sale sign by owner. The challenge is these people may often be the people who don't want to work with an agent. And so I know when I was looking at an investment property, the first question the person asked me was, are you an agent or will you be working with? Will you be working with one? And as soon as I said, yes, I will be working with one, she said she was no longer interested in working with me. So be really wary of that. But it's also, there are pros to working with people directly. You kind of cut out the agent, but you definitely want to have an agent on your side to protect you. So I'm not sure how many of you are considering renting, but it sounds like maybe you're just gaining more information about the process overall. But I want to show you a resource, and there's others out there. I just found this really simple one. Is it better to buy or rent? And so there's a website, and you'll find that there's tons of websites like this out there. So this decision, as it states, depends on many factors, most of which most important are how fast prices and rent will rise, as well as how long you want to stay living there. So this chart will give you some good insight. So obviously when you're buying, you have to consider the down payment, the closing costs. But when you're renting, you just need the deposit or maybe a broker's fee if you used a real estate agent. But what I really like about this is the year-by-year analysis. So what they say is, and this is just their opinion and their conclusion, if you stay in your home for 1 year, renting is better. But if you were to stay in your home for 5 years, buying is better. And so what they have here is it will cost you $1,600 less than renting, which is an average savings of $329 a year. So the bottom line with this chart is it depends on how many years. And if you're thinking 5 years, I'm going to move and find a new home, it could be better to rent.
Jill, I'm just going to chime in. I think this might be a good time. We have a poll question for the group about buying or renting. So maybe we can launch that now. So based on what we've learned or what your personal situations are you more interested in buying or renting at this time? And we'll give this a few minutes. And while you guys are taking the poll, I will address some of the questions. Some of these we will have to address after the fact as they're a little bit more detailed. Of course, we will share the slides as mentioned. Jill, someone asked, what does it mean to get pre-qualified before shopping around for a home?
That's a really good question. And I'll give you a brief overview, and then you'll find in the resources, I give a comparison as one of our resources. So pre-qualified is where your lender, let's say Bank of America, they're going to offer you a mortgage. They take a look at your credit score, your income, your debt to income ratio, and the cost of the home, and they'll tell you how much you can afford when you go out and shop. So for example, you're going to want to think about how comfortable you are with your mortgage payments as well. Even if they say you can afford a $500,000 mortgage, well, do you really want to be paying that much a month when they break it down? So pre-qualified, bottom line, is just a basic sense of how much you can afford based on the lender, like a Bank of America or any lender you're using.
Great, thank you. And I closed our poll and shared the results. So it looks like folks are more interested right now in buying, which is interesting.
Okay. So then this graphic, like I said, is just meant to give you some insight. But for those of you who are considering buying, take a look at, this year-by-year analysis, as I already highlighted. This is not meant to be black and white. It's meant to give you insight. So just really take a really close look, depending on where you are, if it's worth buying or renting. And something else you want to think about, and it's not on here, are the school systems. Maybe right now you're not ready to start a family, but what about in 3, 4, 5 years? And you want to look at the school systems in the area. That may also influence your decision to buy or rent. But again, this is just one outlet. I recommend you also adding to this research on your own. All right. So as you can see, we're going right into workplace benefits. I want to keep us on track with time. So I'm going to highlight these areas because a lot of people, when they think about salary, they're often thinking of a number. And that number may be 50,000, 70,000, whatever it is, for whatever the field you're in. But I want you to know that your benefits are beyond your salary. And so some of you may know this. And if you're a recent alum, then you may not have heard this term, fringe benefits. But what I want to highlight are these, anything with a star. So something that a lot of you may not know is that a benefit could be relocation assistance. So let's say Amazon is interested in you and they want you to move out to Seattle. They may offer you a relocation package for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. But that's one nice benefit beyond your salary. The second is a sign-on bonus. And I highlight this one because I recently spoke with a friend who was offered a $10,000 sign-on bonus because they couldn't match the salary that she wanted to negotiate to. And the reason was her supervisor was too close within that range and they needed at least a $15,000 difference because of the title differences. So they offered her a sign-on bonus as a one-time check. The second is vacation days. Vacation days often come in this package that are just given to us, but I'm going to highlight it as something that you can also negotiate. So let's just say that your employer says we'll give you 6 vacation days a year or 5 personal days a year. You can always ask, is that negotiable? Is that something that we can maybe consider to be 15 days or 7 or 8 days, whatever it may be? And if you look to the right, educational assistance. Oftentimes employers are open and supportive of paying off your student loan debt, or they will invest in you going back to school. And the last thing I want to highlight on this list is a goal incentive bonus. So oftentimes, maybe a recruiter or employer will say, what is your base salary? So let's just say it's $50,000 a year. They may then say, well, our goal incentive bonus is 20% of your annual salary every year. So don't forget that that one number you hear, and we're always driven and thinking about 50,000, 100,000, there's so much more that goes beyond that number. I want to highlight these other areas to negotiate, and then we're going to move on. So your sign-on bonus, as I said, if they can't offer you a higher base salary, ask if there's a possible sign-on bonus. This is typically a one-time payment. Like I said, it's negotiable, and it can be offered for various reasons. I just shared one. The second is that goal incentive bonus. So again, that's a percentage of your base salary, and it's used to supplement your base salary plus motivate you. It's also meant to ensure goals are clearly set and that they're measurable. So that is something you actually can negotiate. And if you look to the right, to the last column, there are other negotiable benefits. As I mentioned, vacation time, relocation assistance, stock options, and educational assistance. And these slides were just meant to give you some insight to those benefits. Something else that we don't all have, but a lot of us may be in, is a union. So as you can see here on this image, there are union benefits. And so it depends on the company or the organization you're with. But one thing I want to highlight is your contract. So depending on where you work, especially if you work for the state or for the government, sometimes a nice benefit to a union is that that union will negotiate your contract year after year with or without you knowing. And so they're typically fighting for higher wages, better benefits. They want to enhance working conditions. But it's a legally binding contract between the union and the organization you work for. And so this is just some insight to what those benefits are. So again, we're going to transition again quickly so that we can stay on track for time. We're going right into buying a car versus leasing a car. So now you have the job, you have the home, how are you going to get there? So a lot of times people are torn between buying and leasing. And so I have this visual graphic here to give you a little bit of insight. One thing I'm going to highlight, and then I'm going to go on because I have an example I want to share. The money. So the first column, if you buy a car, it requires more money up front. If you lease a car, it will require less money up front so you can afford a more expensive car. However, there are downsides. So for example, when you lease, you have to worry about miles. When you buy, you have to worry about all that maintenance. So it's really a tough decision, but it really depends on your personal preference. So I want to talk more about cars and getting that best price, because that's really, it doesn't matter if you're buying or leasing. It's all about the best price. So to start, do not just walk into the dealer and say, give me a number. Get a baseline on websites like TrueCar or Edmunds. Also have some insight to your credit score. I remember one time I walked into a dealer, I had already had my baseline, I was trying to get some insight to what they would offer, and the first question was, what is your credit score and what tier are you in? Because you're going to get a better rate depending on those two factors. You also want to look online on the manufacturer's websites for any incentive and offer. So even when I put this together, I chose Honda just as a place to go for manufacturer incentives. And they had good offers that not all dealers may typically promote to you. So you want to go to the manufacturer website. You also want to go to the dealership for direct offers from them, and they are not the same as manufacturer. So the dealership may offer you a lower monthly lease, or maybe they'll say the down payment is 20% less here versus somewhere else. But get the bottom line. So anytime you leave that dealer after you've done your homework, ask for that quote unquote out the door price from 3 dealers for the same car. And I say that because even when I did my research for my last car, I went to 3 dealers for the same make and model, and I had 3 very, very different prices. So go to those dealers, have them compete. You want them to have to earn your business. Last, ask if they can include a service package. Oftentimes, just to get your business, that general manager or maybe a service manager may say, let's throw in a service package if they're leasing with us. Also, wait until the very end of the month if you can, or even later in the day. It really does make a difference in terms of sales for that dealership. Last, you want to make that offer at the dealer with the lowest price. So you're obviously going to do your homework. I hope that you'll have at least 3 different offers, and then you can always go back and say, is this negotiable? But that's really the best tips I have to get the best price on a car. So here's an example of a recent colleague who actually just picked up a car, and this is the example they shared. They have the dealer incentive, so they got the end of the year clearance sale, which actually happens in October, if not sooner. They also were offered $1,000 cash back from the factory or the manufacturer. They were offered a corporate employee discount. So what happened was My colleague went into a dealer, customer service called them to follow up and say, how was your experience? Did you have a good or a bad experience at that branch? As a result of a not so positive experience, they offered her corporate employee pricing, which is almost unheard of, but it actually did happen. And 4, you can have incentives to stay with the same brand for a second lease if you're leasing. Or if you're buying, there are incentives to leave one brand to go to another. But I want to highlight one thing. If you are leaving a lease, there is a disposal fee, but if you stay with that lease for a second time, they will waive that. So the example that my colleague shared was, this was all combinable. So he pays $244 a month with $1,700 down for 3 years, 12,000 miles a year for his lease, plus free maintenance for a car that was $52,000. And again, this is a colleague who I know put the work in and really compared numbers, but I think it's a really good example. So I mentioned this before, and for the sake of time, I want to keep going. Your credit report is so critical. I believe that the more you know about your credit, the tier that you're in, your credit score, the better chances you are getting that mortgage or the better rate when you go to buy a car. Whatever it is, have good insight for your credit report. So if you look to the left, we are all legally entitled to a free copy of our annual credit report, and that's a clickable link which will bring you there. But another good website is Credit Karma. So this website gives you more than just a score. It will monitor, it will give you good insight, it will help you make better decisions, it will give you great resources, and it will give you your credit score all for free. And I know Credit Karma may have had not the most positive reputation when it first started out, but I can say after the last 3 years, it is definitely a great resource, and I do recommend using it. So in wrapping up today's Adulting 101 summer series, I want you to consider all factors. So thinking about your family, and if it's not right now, what about in 5 years and 7 years? I want you to think about funds. What do you currently have and what might you have? And also think about the future. Where do you want to be in 7 years? How does that influence your decision to buy versus rent, or lease versus buy a car, or anything? The second, invest in an expert. So while I gave you pros and cons to both, I think it is wise to invest in using a real estate agent and a broker, especially when you're going to purchase a home. And also, I want you to see benefits are a package. Don't just think salary as a number. Benefits are a package, and they are all negotiable, or a lot of them are. And the last, invest time to research car options and prices. As you can see in that example I shared, I know the colleague I had probably spent 2 months looking for that best car, but he got the absolute best price. But in anything you do, especially in the topics I covered, put the research in and make the time, and you're going to find that it's truly how we do adulting. So you're going to have these resources. These are all clickable links. And even here, I know the question came up, what is a pre-qualification letter? It'll give you another resource. So I want to thank you all for your attention. I know this was a lot of talking, a lot of content, but I hope you found value in it. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, my profile is here. And if you want to email me any questions I couldn't answer, my email is also right underneath. So thank you all for your attention and your time today.
Great, thank you so much, Jill. We just have one more quick question. There are a couple that you mentioned with some more detailed questions about the pre-qualification process or mortgages. So the folks who ask those questions, I'm going to suggest that you reach out to Jill via email, and she can do her best to assist you or point you in the direction of somebody that can. But 2 more quick questions that I thought maybe with the last few minutes we could just address. One is, does the recent Supreme Court ruling affect union benefits?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it varies from, I was going to say from state to state, but I think it really does vary. And I would say that that's an area, definitely, if that's a topic of interest, look into it for sure. And simple research on the internet will get you that answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it varies union to union and state to state. So definitely something to look into, especially if you are a current union member. And the final question that we'll address on the webinar is, what is a credit tier?
So that's a great question. So tiers, when it comes to credit, typically go from excellent, like top tier, to low. So if you have credit that is typically about 740, really about 740 to 760 and up, and credit goes up to about 850, that is top tier, or tier 1. But if your credit is lower, maybe in the 600, 400, somewhere at the lower range, you may have a tier 4, which is lower, a lower credit tier. So anytime that dealer says to you, what's your credit tier? If you can say tier 1 or excellent, that means you're at the top with a very, very high credit score.
Great, thank you so much. All right, well, that wraps up our webinar today. Thank you all for taking the time to spend your lunch break with us. We will send you a copy of the slides. You can also access it under handouts. And hopefully we'll be in touch and see you at our next one. Thank you.